Welcome back, everybody, to another episode of the Depot Dive. And the Pittsburgh Steelers are just how many days away now, Joe, from their first game? You have quicker mental math than I do?
11,
11
10,
days? Too
11. I
long,
think
too long
11.
from after their last preseason game. It feels like it just feels like a whole month goes by in between the last preseason game and the first game. But football is finally just around the corner. The first actual game will be a week from tomorrow as the Cowboys, is that Cowboys-Eagles?
Yep.
Cowboys-Eagles on that Thursday night. So we're finally going to have a lot to talk about. We have a lot to talk about today because the NFL trimmed their rosters down to 53. Every team was forced to cut from 90 to 53 by 4 p.m. on Tuesday, and then Wednesday, the waiver claims process, the practice squads start to get assembled, so there is plenty to talk about. Injury news, wide receivers on the move around the NFL. We're going to dive into all of that and more. I'm Ross McCorkle, and above me here on the screen is my co-host, Joe Clark. Joe, you didn't put together a 53-man roster prediction, did you?
I did not.
Okay, so you don't have even like a mental note. I put together two of them, one right before training camp, one just a few days before the roster cut downs, and I missed out on 4 players. So that's not great in terms of roster predictions. It's not terrible. I'd say that's about average. I nailed Beanie Bishop Jr. not making it. I missed on some of the offensive line stuff. I think everybody missed on only having 8 defensive backs. We're going to talk about all of this 53-man roster stuff, react to the roster. Joe, where do you want to start with the roster? What was the biggest surprise to you?
Yeah, I think the biggest surprise to me was both James Pierre and Chuck Clark getting released. I wouldn't be surprised if they circle back, but just on the surface, both those guys seem relatively safe. Pierre for his special teams work as the gunner, and Clark because he has a little bit of versatility. He was all right in the preseason. He just seemed like he played well enough to be Pittsburgh's third safety. Assuming they would have kept 4 safeties, but they only opted to keep 3. And instead, they kept 4 quarterbacks. They kept Dante Kent on the roster. I think that was a pretty big surprise, given the fact that he was hurt pretty early on in training camp, didn't play at all in the preseason, and he was a 7th round pick. So it was kind of easy just to write him off because we just didn't see enough from him. But he's stuck on the roster, and Will Howard's stuck on the roster. So there's going to be 2 cuts with the 4 quarterbacks and Kent on the roster that we kind of were surprised about. And I guess those are the 2 guys that, at least for now, are not with the Steelers.
Yeah, Dante Kent was an interesting one because I had him on my initial roster prediction just because of something that Omar Khan said, and it really stuck with me. I think it was during one of the episodes of The Standard, the team's docu-series, if you will, on YouTube, and one of the behind-the-scenes things of Khan talking about picking Kent after the draft. He said, quote, Dante spent significant time studying his film, looking at his production, both not only on the defensive side, but on special teams. The more we watched, the more excited we got about him. Solid character, another guy that's got a really good opportunity, and we expect him to contribute sooner than later. And so I think we've noticed a trend here in Omar Khan's tenure. They don't really cut draft picks. Now, some of those guys end up going to IR and don't end up ever playing for the team, a la Ryan Watts and a couple other guys have not necessarily contributed because of injury stuff, but they've never cut one outright in that initial year. And so I kind of had Kent penciled in on my initial 53, but did not have him on the final one because he didn't play. And so maybe should have seen it coming that they would carry him on and then stash him on IR, much like they did Logan Lee last year. Kind of seems like they might do that this year with Kent. Maybe he'll come back this year and contribute. I don't know. But most likely, they will just stash him on IR. They could always decide to designate him to return later in the process. Because they carried him onto the initial 53, they didn't have to do the designated to return right away. The only player who had that designation was Corey Trice Jr. So, a lot of interesting stuff in the secondary. 3 safeties right now. I agree with you. They are likely to, I would think, bring back Chuck Clark. Now, that's not a slam dunk. Sebastian Castro is actually among the last wave of cuts. they got down to, what was it, like 67 or 66 or something like that, heading into the last round of cuts where they only had, 13 players or whatever to pare down. And Sebastian Castro was in that last cohort of players that got cut. And so, do they like him enough? I don't know. Maybe. But I would think Clark is probably the odds-on favorite there. The Steelers in the past, just looking at their history, have kept 10 defensive backs almost every year. I think dating back to like 2019, there was one year where they kept 11 and one year where they kept 9. I don't think I can remember a year where they kept 8. It's been a while. So that speaks to, well, A, we've already talked about, there are probably more roster moves coming. But B, I mean, I think they really like the guys at the top of that depth chart, and that's been apparent all preseason long as Mike Tomlin continues to say very lofty things about that secondary. So, yeah, absolutely, the secondary was the big standout there. I did have Skylar Thompson making my 53, kind of predicting that Howard would be one of those designated to return guys. He is on the roster for now, but should be probably headed to IR soon. I think Jerry Dulac reported that. We're going to get into some of the injury stuff later, but where else do you want to go on the roster, Joe?
Yeah, just I think it's kind of interesting the way that they are maneuvering to not put Howard and Kent on IR immediately. I think it's smart because you only get the two designated to return spots. You only get 8 throughout the season. So if you burn 2 of them on cut down day, then they're taking up the 8 spots, and Will Howard's probably not going to play this season, and who knows how much Kent's going to play either. So I think it's good business to kind of keep them, and then both Pierre and Clark were vested veterans, so they weren't subject to waivers. So they could kind of make a handshake deal if that's the route they're going to go. Say, hey, we're just going to bring you back. It's a procedural move. So I think we'll see something with that in the next few days. And then Beanie Bishop was another cut that, not a huge surprise because last week Terrell Austin had talked about how important the preseason final against Carolina was for Bishop to kind of earn a roster spot. Well, he ended up getting hurt and he didn't play in that game. So he ended up getting cut and circled back to the practice squad. So good to at least keep him around. I was mildly surprised he wasn't claimed off waivers just because, he had the 4 interceptions last year. Splash plays look nice. But, 2 of them were in one game and he lost playing time down the stretch. And obviously he was an undrafted free agent, so it wasn't like there's a lot of, hype around him last year. But I guess good for the Steelers that nobody else took a chance on him. And now they have additional cornerback depth and somebody that, has made plays in the past. And, at least as a backup cornerback is somebody that could at least, somewhat be relied on.
Yeah, I think it speaks somewhat to the evolving role of the slot corner in the NFL. We saw guys like, who was that? Kyler for the Bears. Who
Tyler
was it?
Gordon.
Yeah, Kyler Gordon get paid big time. And, the Steelers have brought in a guy like Jalen Ramsey who's going to play the slot. I mean, 5, 6, 7 years ago, you wouldn't have dreamt of spending that kind of money on a slot corner there. And I think it used to kind of be a role where, maybe they'd play a few passing downs, but you'd bring these guys in who are better tacklers than anything, because more likely than not, you were going to end up facing some running stuff. Bishop definitely is a short tackler, but in today's NFL, those nickel corners are in, if not roughly half of the snaps for the defense, and you've got to be able to cover. And so Beanie Bishop, just because I don't really think his coverage stuff is up to par, and then he doesn't really have that flexibility. He's not a huge special teamer. Yeah, I saw that cut coming from a mile away once he started to do the roster math. And man, I had him not making it, factoring in that they would keep 10 defensive backs. And so they kept 8. It was a no-brainer at that point for Bishop to be cut. But I do like him being back on the practice squad. Why not? He's a guy who you can, I mean, I would assume he will end up being elevated at least a time or two this season. He could even be a candidate to sign soon if, with one of those Howard or Kent moves, although I would assume James Pierre is probably higher up in the order because, again, special teams. Right now, who's the other gunner opposite Ben Skoranek? That is going to be a question. And Skoranek's dealing with a toe of some variety. And so who are the gunners right now? I would think you need to bring Pierre back ASAP if that's the case. And I think, I forget, I would love to credit whoever put this out there, but somebody put out there that nobody's played more games for the Steelers than Pierre since 2020 or something like that. Do you know who that was that put that out there?
I think it was Chris Adamski.
Okay, yeah, good stat there. I mean, I don't know how many would have called that, but very interesting. And yeah, he's been around for a while, bounced on and off the roster. He's proved his value as a special teamer, and honestly, last year in certain spots as a outside corner in a pinch, he did an admirable job. And not always the best, but he can get you through a game if needed. So, anything else on the offensive side of the? I mean, I don't really think there were any surprises on offense other than keeping four quarterbacks.
Yeah, I mean, the only other one maybe you could say is Andrus Pete being kept over, a guy like Dylan Cook, but I think Pete has more experience, gives you tackle guard versatility. Keep him over Max Sharping, who has more guard center versatility. I mean, he was brought in late in the process, was okay in the preseason, so I think that one could have gone either way, but I think, you take the experience there, and for how bad this backup offensive line has looked, it's not bad to have a guy that, at least has been a Pro Bowler in the past there, and can at least maybe provide some leadership in the second unit.
Yeah, the Steelers have been primarily playing him at guard, and I think almost entirely played him at guard in the preseason. But it was listed as a tackle on their depth chart and played a lot of tackle in the past, and certainly has tackle size. And so, yeah, I think they value the experience there more than anything. Dylan Cook's been around. Dylan Cook, probably a guy you get on the practice squad. He wasn't claimed. Nope, Steelers were claimed at the waiver process. So, yeah, I think you can still have Cook around as an option, and there's plenty of ways to keep more linemen around. Now, I also wouldn't be surprised if they go outside the organization because I think offensive line depth is one of the biggest issues. Pete had, I think, it was the Buccaneers game. One of the three preseason games, he actually had a really good game. The other two, not so much. And so there's flashes with Pete, and given the fact that he only just joined the team, not that long ago, I think there is a little bit more upside for him in general, and they like the veteran stuff there. So yeah, the offense, not any big surprises. Special teams, the punting battle, Corliss Waitman ending up winning the. I think we kind of talked about it last week, and we both agreed that Johnston was more likely. I think you had Johnston firmly as your prediction. I had Johnston as my prediction, but kind of noted that Waitman is cheaper and younger, and I guess that I don't know if that was exactly why they factored in Waitman as the starting guy, but he won the job, and I think that was a kind of a surprise to people.
Yeah, no, I think it was. I mean, it was a surprise to me too. But I think Alex put out the stat out there that Waitman was first in hang time for punches for the preseason. That's pretty valuable. I mean, and he did a great job filling in last year, so a little bit cheaper. I am surprised though, and I feel like it was a little maybe a little bit short sighted that there was a report that the Saints inquired about trading for Waitman, and the Steelers turned it down and stuck with him. I mean. I thought the battle, at least from the eye test, was fairly close, and Johnson's been really good throughout his career. It's so hard to trade a punter. I think if you can trade a punter, maybe you get even if it's a conditional seventh round pick next year. I'm a little surprised they didn't explore that more and opt to keep Johnson and trade Waitman to the Saints. But I mean, obviously they really like him, and hopefully he can repeat and build upon what he did last season.
Yeah, and the Saints, I was kind of wondering the same thing. I mean, if it's close, then obviously trade Waitman and keep Johnston if you like them that much, and they seem to. And I mean, even when he was injured last year, he was putting together like detailed punting reports for the special team. I mean, he was staying engaged, which you don't have to. If you're the injured veteran punter, no one's going to fault you if you kind of fall into obscurity for a little bit there. But he was staying engaged, and so I was surprised, and I think Alex pointed out that the Saints don't really have any seventh round picks for the next 2 years. And so what were they going to trade for him? Sixth might have been too rich. And then if you're talking about 2028, sevenths, that's basically nothing. I mean, that's not even worth really mentioning. I guess you take it over nothing, but is that going to be the deciding thing between a punter battle if you do like Waitman more than you might like Johnston? No. So, yeah, I mean, Waitman, younger, cheaper. Cheaper is only matters so much because they do still, owe Johnston some money. They paid him, I forget what stat Dave put together, but they paid him some absurd amount per punt, which
He was 4 million for 2 punts.
that's pretty sweet for him. Although he had to deal with a grueling knee injury, so it's not like he he didn't get some in return there. But yeah, I think that's all for the roster that I wanted to talk about. Carson Bruner won over Mark Robinson. Again, a cheaper and younger kind of situation. And Bruner looked good in the preseason, made a lot of special teams tackles, looked pretty good on defense, led the team in tackles in at least one of those preseason games. So not a huge surprise there, but still worth noting. And again, no Steelers draft picks were cut. We'll see how they all shake out from here with IR and stuff, but they all made it for now. Moving on to the second topic, wide receivers on the move around the league. The Steelers have been in this hunt for a receiver for feels like forever at this point, and pretty much any name that is possibly available or available gets linked to the Steelers by sometimes credible, sometimes not credible reports, and several of those receivers are on the move. I guess, where do we want to start?
Yeah, I think we can start with Marquez Valdez-Scantling because that was the only real, that was fairly credible. I was choosing between the 49ers and the Saints. Aaron Wilson reported that, and then I think it was Ari Myroff reiterated that and announcing that he signed with the 49ers. So, yeah, I mean, the Steelers, he has familiarity with Aaron Rodgers. He's a great deep ball threat, so it makes sense why the team could be interested there or was interested there. But just another in a long line of receivers the Steelers have missed out on. Kendrick Bourne was released by the Patriots, a guy that maybe they could have some interest in, but he's probably going to go back to San Francisco where he started his career. The Vikings had a trade worked out for Bourne, but it fell through. They pivoted and traded for Adam Thielen, who I don't think I would have been super psyched if the Steelers got Adam Thielen, but I also think he kind of just wanted to go back to Minnesota, so that kind of made sense.
Mm-hmm.
I think Tim Patrick got dealt for a sixth. Again, for Tim Patrick, I think that's fairly rich,
Yeah.
given what he is right now. So, for the Steelers who want to hold on to as much 2026 draft capital as possible, are they really going to give up, a fifth, sixth round pick for a player that for them is really going to be their third receiver? Because is Tim Patrick better than Calvin Austin, better than what you think you get out of Roman Wilson? Not really. Marquez Valdez Scantling's probably not a number two definitely not a number two for this team. Kendrick Bourne, the Patriots have a bajillion receivers and still opted to cut him just even though he was one of their better guys when he was healthy. So what does he really have left in the tank? There's just not really a whole lot of intriguing options out there. The best one's probably Jacoby Myers if he does get traded. The Raiders did sign Amari Cooper, which could increase the likelihood of a Myers trade, but he wants more money. Steelers paid DK Metcalf $33 million. Jacoby Myers probably wants somewhere in like the $22 to $24 million range. Is he really worth paying that? So they might be just kind of SOL if they're really looking for surefire receiver upgrade. They might be getting a number four, number five type of guy at this point.
There are only two receivers claimed at waivers. One being, I don't even know. I honestly don't know this player very well. Delavon Campbell to the Panthers. Not familiar with that player, but Trey Palmer is somebody that I think we've highlighted before as a potential option for the Steelers. He got claimed by was it the Saints?
Saints. Yep.
And the Saints, an interesting move for the Saints recently, too. They traded weren't they the team that traded for Devon Vele from the Broncos?
Yes.
So, and that was the thing that kicked off this wide receiver trade market. And it was like, holy smokes, these guys are getting huge returns. I think we saw a report from Diane Orsini and maybe some others that there were several teams heavily monitoring the wide receiver market, the Steelers kind of being one of them. And yeah, I'd say so. If Devon Vele, a 7th round pick last year, I believe, he did look promising for the Broncos, and he's a big body guy. Fetching a 4th is rich, especially for a team like the Saints, who are they really looking to compete right this very second? I don't know. But yeah, I think that kicked off and set the tone for the wide receiver market, and maybe things were just too rich for the Steelers when they poked around for some of these names, and they're like, we don't want to part with one of our 12 draft picks next year, especially not if it's a 5th or a 4th or whatever it might be. So maybe they just decided, hey, we do like our room, and I think we've been hearing that all along. You kind of wonder if that's just lip service. Like, yeah, they like their room, and I mean, what are they? They're not going to say they don't like their room, and so you kind of wonder if it's some of that. But I do think that they like their room, and Calvin Austin III barely played in the preseason, or well, he didn't play in the preseason. He barely played at camp because I think August 1st was when he got injured there. So it's been almost a month. He's fortunately returning to practice and seems like he may be able to play in week one. So, yeah, I don't know if they're going to add a receiver at this point. Who would it be? You said Jacoby Myers. I mean, Alex has outlined several other players around the league who were cut that might be interesting. You guys can all go check out that article. Malachi Corley, a guy who Aaron Rodgers called his favorite receiver of the draft last year, could be a potential option, though I don't know. I mean, that's not a needle mover. This is a guy that caught 3 passes last year and also may have had some off-field kind of issues with the Jets in terms of his maturity, and so I don't know about all of that. But it is worth noting, at least because of the connection. Steelers sent Zach Azani to his pro day, had him in for a pre-draft visit, so there's some stuff to consider there for sure, but I don't know about a receiver at this point. I suppose it could come, but don't expect a needle mover. Expect kind of a Scotty Miller, Robert Woods type of player, in my opinion there. So,
Yeah, interesting update here, going back to our last topic and also on this one, Robert Woods going back to the Steelers practice squad and also signing to the practice squad, so not back to the active roster, is James Pierre. So the Steelers,
ah,
while we've been recording, have been made active adding to their practice squad here, but Pierre, who I think we kind of expected to come back to the active roster, is signing to the practice squad. Steelers can, I mean, they get 2 elevations before each game, so if they can elevate a guy 3 times, so if they need him to be their gunner, they can still have him in the fold. But as of now, not on the active roster, him and Woods to the practice squad, Keyshawn Williams to the practice squad, Stephen Jones to the practice squad,
nice.
JJ Galbraith and Sebastian Castro to the practice squad, and DeMarvin Leal back to the practice squad.
Oh, come on. To Marvin
Can't quit
Leal.
him. They can't quit him.
I think what Jerry Dulac said that Tomlin really likes Leal,
Yep.
and I don't know what is there. I mean, I'll say this: he stood out in that final preseason game, but I don't know if it was necessarily in a good way, lining up
It
off
was
sides and having a
it
face
was
mask.
he was always around the ball and then he was always just doing something incredibly stupid. It was one after the other.
Very, very intriguing athlete, but he's never been able to make the leap to becoming an intriguing football player. And so
Yep.
I guess whatever, you keep him on the practice squad. I guess why not? Uh, I'm kind of surprised that maybe he didn't look for a fresh start. I mean, maybe the lack of opportunity there, or I don't know, but I am kind of surprised he didn't look for a fresh start. The Steelers have kind of put him in a tough situation throughout his career. Just moving him positions, asking him to add weight, cut weight, whatever it might be, and he's gotten injured. And I mean, it's just not been a great shake for him. So, yeah, but interesting practice squad stuff. There is a practice squad tracker up on the website. I'm sure probably by the time most of you are listening to this, that will be finalized. So you can see the full practice squad, the full 53-man roster, all of the roster cuts, all the claims that went through, none being the Steelers, none being the Steelers players. You can see all of that up on the site right now, SteelersDepot.com. We're going to move to injury updates now. There's a handful of kind of notable ones, and we've touched on some of these throughout the show. Will Howard, we talked about, he has that fractured hand. Mike Tomlin said he's close to being ready. I'd say close to being a full participant, I think he said, actually, which is, to me, kind of surprising when Jerry Dulac, like the next day, is saying he is going to go to IR. Although I guess why not stash him if they like Skylar Thompson as much as I think they probably do after that stellar preseason. Why not, stash Howard on IR? I mean, is there really even a need to bring Howard back? I don't know. I mean, I guess you want him to practice, but at that point, you're just the kind of scout team practice. It's not like you're kind of getting the benefit of the mental reps on the sideline from being on IR as much as you would be kind of running the scout team. I mean, I guess you can pick up on the speed of the game a little bit more if you're running the scout team, but maybe they just keep him on IR. I don't know. But that's the first one we want to talk about. Some stuff on defense, Joe.
Nick Herbig, who left the team's second preseason game after just 3 snaps, suffered a hamstring injury and unsure if he's going to play week one. It seemed like it was a minor injury. Mike Tomlin didn't even talk about it after the game, but Herbig hasn't returned to practice, and he's hoping to be out there for week one. Mike Tomlin said they'll know closer to week one if he's going to be out there. So still up in the air. And then obviously Derek Harmon sprained his MCL against the Panthers. Really, the worst thing you want to see happen in the final preseason game is your first round pick go down with injury. It looked pretty serious at first. Harmon was carted off, had a towel over his head. He was emotional. It seemed like it could have been, potentially pretty bad, but luckily just a sprain. He might only miss 1 week, according to Jerry Dulac. Means he might miss 3 to 4 weeks. Just kidding. Uh, but yeah, so good news for Harmon. He didn't go on IR DTR, so the Steelers seem hopeful he'll be able to come back pretty quickly. I mean, given the timeline of the injury, coming back week one would be tough, but there's certainly a chance he can get back out there for week two or week three. I'd probably peg a week three return just given the practice time, but ideally he's back out there for week two. And I mean, Steelers defensive line depth behind him. I mean, I was advocating if for Harm when he does miss time, if he's out week one, I'm for Y.A. Black to get the start because otherwise you're looking at like Isaiah Loudermilk back there. I mean, they kept Logan Lee on the active roster, but he's been primarily playing nose tackle, so that wouldn't be a 1-to-1 fit. They have Asizi at Tomweo. Definitely still don't know how to say that name, but he got kept on the active roster, so they have bodies there. How many of them are going to really be productive is really the question. Like we know what Isaiah Loudermilk goes at this point. He's fine. He's not going to like do anything super special, but he's a decent run defender. He's not going to give you a lot against the pass. Block, I mean, I think is super intriguing given how he's played in the preseason, but they're going to have to find a way to mitigate the loss of Harmon for at least one game. And then Alex Highsmith, he's going to play week one. He was out with, I think it was a groin. He's just had a couple of groin injuries the last couple of seasons, but they'll be out there week one after missing some time in training camp in the preseason. So good news for the Steelers pass rush.
Yep, and Jack Sawyer's still waiting in the wings there. Actually, a lot of people thought he kind of had a bad preseason just because his production wasn't there. I think he had 8 tackles, 2 tackles for loss, and 2 quarterback hits, no sacks, and he played, I believe it was 100 defensive snaps or close to it. One of the most played Steelers in the preseason, played well into basically every game, fourth quarter type stuff for him. So I think a lot of people were down on him after the preseason just because, he was hyped up as this like steal in the fourth round who should have been a second rounder or whatever, and then he didn't even produce in the preseason against backups. And it's like, well, yes, okay, the production wasn't there, but the tape did tell a slightly different story. I think Alex had a post in defense of Jack Sawyer. I put up a film room the next day, kind of breaking down all notable plays from his preseason play. I think he looked fine to me, honestly. He has a good motor. The fundamentals are there. I think he has a good array of pass rush moves that he can use. He showed them, but he tends to only go to his fastball. He just needs to learn how to vary those a little bit more. One move can set up another. He's a big, powerful guy, yet he kind of goes to his speed and finesse moves more than he does his power stuff. So he can, mix in that power a little bit more and kind of build off of it from there. I think that would serve him well. And he almost had, a couple of sacks. One of them was that crazy dump off from Seth Hennigan. He barely managed to get the ball off. I don't even really know how it was physically possible. Completed the pass to the running back, like over his head behind. It was a crazy dump off that happened. And, Sawyer was right there basically for the sack. And so I think, nothing to worry about there in terms of a fourth outside linebacker. You could do a lot worse. And yeah, Sawyer maybe plays 6, 7, 8 snaps a game at first, and I don't think that the Steelers will be in huge trouble if somebody gets injured and he's forced into that top backup role for a short period of time.
Yeah, no, I absolutely. I think Steelers fans are a little bit spoiled because we saw Nick Herbig have an electric preseason his rookie year. So, you hear all the buzz about Sawyer, and I think everybody kind of expects that same sort of production. It doesn't happen like that for everybody. And I think, as you said, I think Sawyer's fine. I think there's a lot of upside still there. I mean, if you're worried about him after 3 preseason games, I think you need to get your priorities straight.
Well said. We're going to head to our phone line here, and if you want to have your question answered on a future episode, that's 412-254-3145. If I spoke too fast, that's going to be in the show notes as well. We would love to hear from you. You can actually leave a voicemail or you can text the line. Just tell us your name and where you're from. We'd love to get to know as many of you as possible. This one from a regular, Brett in San Angelo, Texas.
Hello, Depot Dive. This is Brett from San Angelo, and my question slash Mr. Thoughts are about the preseason. As we see another preseason fade away, there's been discussion, at least on the podcast, about what's the preseason going to look like as we inevitably move from 3 to 2 games. And I just want your thoughts on what you're seeing, or if you agree with kind of my vision that this year, at least, they seem to go much more to keeping the veterans out and playing the kind of bubble guys, first-year guys, and rosters a lot more in these preseason games. To me, like I said, guys like even Nick Herbig was held out of the first game, who's not a starter, but just a rotation piece, but a guy whose, position is kind of known, and obviously, not that I'm advocating for guys like Watt or Hayward or, Metcalf, et cetera, to get preseason time, but there was not even a sniff of those guys getting preseason snaps. So I guess my question is, what do you see in the future? My thinking is, I think you're going to see more of this. I think when they go to 2 games, you're probably not going to see any veteran suit up who has any significant role on the team. Only kind of bubble guys who are fighting for a job, or guys at the end of the roster. That's my thought. I want to curious what you think, and I'll shut up and listen to the answer.
All right, moving the preseason games down from 4 to 3, and then in the future probably 3 to 2, and starters playing less and less. And I think he's kind of speaking from a perspective of, well, the Steelers didn't play starters hardly at all this year, a little bit in the third game, but other than that, not much. And so, yeah, it is a interesting dynamic with the preseason. And if they move to 2 games, will 0 veterans play? Is it just going to become the roster bubble Olympics in the preseason, like entirely? Joe, what is your opinion?
I mean, I don't think unless or really until at this point, because they probably are going to go to 18 games. And when they go to 18 games, then it will make sense for the preseason to get shortened to 2 games. But until then, there's really no reason to shorten it. I mean, even though the starters didn't play, it's still another game of evaluation for some of your younger guys, which is useful. From a league perspective, it's another game that you can put money in the owner's pockets. But yeah, I mean the league's not going to give up an extra preseason or a third preseason game until you go to 18 games. At that point, the players are going to want to give it up because it's too many games. It'll be a concession. Um, but yeah, for right now, I mean, I think just because the Steelers didn't play their starters, I mean, the Bengals traditionally haven't. They play their starters this year. The Chiefs play their starters for a while. Teams did it. I mean, this is the first year since for a very long time that the Steelers didn't at least play their starting quarterback. Um, so just because some guys are rested, I mean, I don't think it's really a huge indictment on where the league is going to go. But yeah, once you get to those 18 regular season games, then I do agree that we'll be going down to 2 preseason games.
Yeah, I think the Steelers this year not playing starters is a direct relation to how old their roster is and how veteran their roster is. And I think the ESPN, or who was that published it this morning?
Those Philly Voice.
Philly Voice. I don't know who that is, but they put together a study basically ranking rosters by average age. And the Steelers had second oldest roster in the NFL. I think last year they had more of a mix. They had the oldest defense and one of the youngest offenses. But this year, they brought in older guys like Jonnu Smith, Aaron Rodgers, DK Metcalf, kind of pull that offense average up. And the defense is still, as old as ever, if not even slightly older than last year. And so, yeah, I think the reason you're not seeing Steelers play in the preseason is because of the age of their team. And I think you're always going to have some coaches whose philosophy it is to definitely play guys in the preseason. Even if it moves down to 2 games, I think you'll still see starters out there for at least a drive or 2 in, at least one of the preseason games, even if they move to 2. Though, yeah, you only have limited options to see these roster bubble guys play. And so the NFLPA, I mean, they need to figure their stuff out, because if they give up an 18th game and they pare down the preseason to 2 games, that is A, putting their players at risk for injury more, and B, giving the vast majority of their union, which is the guys who might not make it a second or third year in the league, those guys have less of an opportunity to stick around. So I think there's a lot of conversations that need to be had in the NFLPA. But thank you for the question, Brett. And if you guys want a question answered on a future show, that is 412-254-3145. I'm Ross. That is Joe. And next week, we will be previewing the Steelers at the Jets. Let's go. Catch you guys next time.